Welcome to another episode of the Tryhards. This time we'll be known as the Quad Hards because we're going to be joined by my buddy David Yanik, who is the singer of the Gnarly Whales. And the folk punk, yeah, right? How sweet is that name?
See, now that's a good band name.
See, you're gonna. By the way, you would love all this like folk punk stuff, Ryan. I need to start sending you like Gnarly Whales and a handful of other bands. Sledding with Tigers is pretty good. They just did a whole record where they told the story of Space Jam, the movie, in folk punk form, and it's beautiful. Well, so like today we're going to talk about the band Against Me and their record Reinventing Axl Rose. So, which is why I have David coming on the podcast. He is a folk punk artist who has opened up for like every modern day big folk punk band. And Ryan asked if he was from like bumfuck Florida, which yes he is. And he was like, well, because all of them are from there. And the reason why Ryan is Against Me is from Gainesville, Florida, and they are kind of the originators of folk punk as we know it. Although anybody into folk punk like refuses to say their name, unless it's followed by only the old stuff, because we're still punks after all. So with Against Me, they were first signed on this tiny label called Planet X Records, and that record label is based in Florida. That is where a lot of folk punk bands were first signed, which is a main reason, maybe not Against Me, but definitely because of Planet X, why folk punk is so many folk punk bands seem to come out of Florida. It's always been on a lot of cases a very much an East Coast thing. It's popular, like I don't know, it's weird. It's like I visit a folk punk forum on Reddit, just our folk punk, which is an amazing place. There's maybe like 10,000 people there, maybe like a couple hundred to 1,000 are active. It's really, really cool, and it's like the place, ever since like the Against Me message boards got shut down like a decade ago because the band didn't like what people were saying on it, it's been like the mecca for this extremely niche genre. And Reinventing Axl Rose is an album that kind of like spearheaded this genre. It's also, in a very Dylan-esque way, the album where they went electric, and it pissed a lot of people off. Which is not something the band got away from. Seems like everything they did pissed off their entire fan base, but they just kept getting bigger and bigger anyway. So while we're waiting for David to join, I'm going to kind of talk about the early, like, brief history of Against Me, and then we'll go into the record. So Against Me started out playing as a three-piece, playing electric, in like high school age, whatever, in Florida. Fortunately, they put up a lot of their old videos, so you can see crazy old songs that were only ever put out on like a cassette tape back when their singer, formerly known as Tom Gable, now is Laura Jane Grace. So I'm gonna be saying she for everything, but it's really weird in my mind because I end up like, this is a person who I've met a dozen times in my life, who I've been influenced and inspired by since I was 15 years old, lived by her words. But for the longest time, when I think of these words in these songs, the image, name, and pronouns of Tom Gable come into my head. But I will be saying she, of course, to be, because I'm PC, bro. Hey, you PC, bro? But like also because it's respectful. This is one of my idols.
With the knowledge we have now, looking back, does that change your perspective on these songs? Like, can you pick things that like, oh, so that's what that meant?
There are a couple. Yes, there are like probably 4 or 5 songs with blatant references to it. But as she has put, she didn't even know then. She was just trying to be honest. Yeah. And it seeped out into the lyrics even without a cognitive like understanding of what was happening. And it's like, which makes it really cool because you're like, holy shit, it was there the whole time. And
because it happened, she transitioned before this most latest album, right?
Yes, yeah. Although,
but is there a point? If you listen to the entire discography, can you pick out a point chronologically where those references are starting to happen?
The first reference, yeah, absolutely. So just, and this will go in line with the brief history that I'll do. So they put out a couple records on like cassette or EPs, whatnot, but they all sounded like crap because they were recorded in like an attic. They were made on instruments that weren't even real instruments. It was like a homemade drum kit and a acoustic guitar with an electric guitar head, I believe, or neck, and they
What
had.
year is this?
Something like 97 to 2000.
Okay.
And so, but the other thing was that the initial like recordings got warped by being like left in the rain or something. So they're extra like crappy quality, but they it like improves the sound because it's so distinct and unique. So eventually they put out the first well-known thing that they put out is called an EP that was put out in, I believe, 2000. Oh, let me just look it up real quick. Let's see. 2001, called Crime as Forgiven By Against Me. They always had like titles like that. And let's see. Yeah, so that was two instruments. It was acoustic guitar and a homemade drum kit. And that was 2001. And they put out 6 songs that were really well received eventually. I heard them in early 2002 before LimeWire, maybe Kazaa. I think we found it through Kazaa. But they were still touring the country, and no one cared. Like, they had just started picking up a little bit of momentum. And they were one of those early bands on file sharing that really got around in the punk community, where they went from playing laundromats that no one cared about, these old songs on this record, to all of a sudden the music's everywhere, but they had been like ignored so much for playing these songs that you'd go see them play to a club of like 100, 200 people, screaming fans, like hardcore fans, wanting to hear these old songs, and they refused to play them because they had such bad memories associated with them. And it was like, where were all of you guys when we were actually trying to make this work? And it wasn't until years later where they ended up like playing some again. But it also had to do with the drummer and the singer were best friends, and the politics of being in a band and the touring and whatnot drove them to not even be friends anymore. And so for the longest time, when Against Me was finally getting some real success, she had already, again, that's what comes to my mind when I tell the story, she had already lost her best friend through being in the band, like in all the struggles of being in a band. And a lot of these songs were closely tied to this friendship that just never. And so the band they started out like very much standing for autonomy over anarchism, because autonomy would be like no laws, but we're all good people, so we make this work without like being forced to by a government. But it was also had this emotional component to it lyrically. These early records really had that, where they were like, I don't know, they were just like, here's a line, and this is even in one of the songs, there's got to be something more than careers, laws, country, whatever it is. Like, there's something, it was about searching for some meaning of life in the connections that punk rock creates, not necessarily the politics of punk rock, which is what most punk rock talk about. And it was just this some kind of emotional connection where they managed to weave nihilism, anarchism, and the punk rock experience in this transient lifestyle into an emotional component that other punk bands hadn't been able to do. And I think that's why they had such an early rabid fan base. I was just telling Ryan all about it before the podcast. An Against Me show was something like you'd never been a part of. Everyone is like crying and hugging and screaming and moshing and like throwing fists in the air and just all this craziness. And it was just so intense. Even when you'd see them open up for bigger bands, most people wouldn't know who they were, but every Against Me fan would find their way to the center of the pit, and it was just this crazy expression of like intense anger and frustration and love, and just, it's unbelievable. The band would play the songs 10 times the speed. You couldn't even tell what the hell was happening. Turns out later, they used to say in interviews, we're young, we have all this energy, let's just leave it out on the stage. And then a few years later in interviews, well, we were all coked up. Well, I don't know what to tell you. So anyway, it was just this unbelievable thing to behold when you'd go to an Against Me show. And the tail end of this emotional connection to punk rock before they kind of went into a couple of albums of Rock Against Bush, stereotypical punk rock of its politics, which are still great records, but it wasn't. Yep. But Brad, you got to see them with me at the tail end of what I consider the most intense against me phase, which I'm so glad that you got to experience that. They had like a 7-year span of touring where those shows were a sight to behold. Like, it was something else. So anyway, just blowing through this history, and then we'll go back to the specific record. Reinventing Axl Rose was the first. It was before they were on a bigger independent label, but it was when they were on a big enough independent label that they were starting to get a real fan base. And they also, Reinventing Axl Rose was compiled from a couple of new songs mixed with the best of their acoustic EP that they put out in 2001 and Crime, the EP I just talked about from 2001. They took the best of those songs, in their opinion, plus a couple of new ones, made it full band and electric, and recorded it in 2002, and that's Reinventing Axl Rose. Then they made, with that same lineup, which included a new drummer from the acoustic record, but with the bassist who was their original bassist before they just did acoustic back in the late 90s. His name is Dustin Friedkin, and he did the backing vocals on Reinventing Axl Rose, which I always thought was just Laura Jane Grace, the singer, doing both vocal parts. But it turns out the higher-pitched vocals on that record, along with Disco Before the Breakdown, an EP that happened shortly after Reinventing Axl Rose, like, that was the higher voice, was this guy Dustin. And their voices together were so perfect. I loved it so much. Then they went on and got signed to Fat Records, did 2 records with them called As the Eternal Cowboy and Searching for a Former Clarity. Both were very big records for them. Launched them from being a band that could sell out a 200 to 300 seat club to opening up for bands like Green Day and Foo Fighters. Then they signed to a major label, did New Wave, and keep in mind, people called them sellouts when they went electric. Then people called them sellouts when they went onto a bigger independent label. By the time they signed to a major label, like, no one really said anything, because they were like, all of the fans, they went from being the most beloved underground punk band to being the most hated underground punk band, which must have been rough because it was at a point where they hadn't gained any mainstream success. So it was just like they went from having a fan base to having a fan base who hated them. Like, it was, like I said, they shut down their own message board because they were just getting shit on day in, day out. And they didn't even change their sound. Like, it was insane. They were like the last band to have to deal with this sellout bullshit before the internet really got good and you couldn't call someone a sellout anymore because music was essentially free. So they had a fan base who wanted free music but wouldn't let them do anything to gain money. Like, it was, granted, they did have a song, and we'll talk about it on Reinventing Axl Rose, where they mention about how bands shouldn't make money. So, who knows? Maybe they set themselves up for that. So anyway, so they put out 2 major label releases, New Wave and White Crosses, and at that point, their singer, then known as Tom Gable, puts out an acoustic record which has a song on it called Transgender Dysphoria Blues. Now, it is not uncommon for punk bands, specifically Against Me, to sing songs from the perspective of a marginalized group that they are not necessarily a part of. It's all about raising awareness for these issues. So when that song was put out, no one really thought much of it, especially like a couple records before on New Wave. There's a song called The Ocean, where she says, then known as Tom Gable, my mother once told me if I were born a woman, she would have named me Laura. And by the way, Grace is the last name of her grandmother, who the opening track of Reinventing Axl Rose is written about, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then even before that, on Searching for a Former Clarity in 2005, there is a song, the title song from the record, talks about dressing up in women's clothes and keeping a journal with all your secrets. And she refers to it as confessing childhood secrets of dressing up in women's clothes, compulsions you never knew the reasons to. Will everyone you've ever met or loved, of everyone you've ever met or loved, be just the relationship based on a false presumption, despite everyone that you'll ever meet or love, in the end, will you be all alone? And that's 2005. Transgender Dysphoria Blues, I believe, was released some point in like 2011. It's not the new record, the acoustic song. The first time where that word was used.
It was True Trans Soul Rebel, right?
Oh, that's the. I'll get to that in a second, probably. If you're looking it up, then you know better than I would, because it was at that point after New Wave. I loved White Crosses, but after New Wave, I gotta admit I fell off the Against Me band. I couldn't do it. I still saw them live occasionally, but like I stopped being like, this was from the second I heard Crime is Forgiven by Against Me. I like hinged on every word Laura Jane Grace said. Yeah. Whether it was in interviews, in the documentary that they did, which I'm in, and with anything that she said at a concert. I lived so much of my life around the words of Laura Jane Grace / Tom Gable. Like, probably I'm trying to think of someone who had more of an impact on me that I can specifically point out. And also, and then if we go even further back into my personal favorite Against Me record, which is a 3-song EP called Disco Before the Breakdown, there's a song, the title song from that one has a line in the chorus, and I think now what this is about is the idea of if she was in fact transgender, because she says she didn't know, dressing how she wanted to dress. The chorus is, and I know they're going to laugh at us, because at the time she was married. She's been married twice, both to women. And at the time she was married, and said, and I know they're going to laugh at us when they see us out together holding hands like this. They wouldn't understand if we told them all the reasons. Not that I think this deserves any kind of explanation. And it keeps referring to secrets, and it's so bittersweet and all this stuff. And I think it's now Laura Jane Grace as Tom Gable thinking, what if I dressed how I wanted to dress and still was with the person I wanted to be with? I'm 6.5 feet tall, pretty like gruff looking, like even in transition, like it may be obvious that I'm physically a man, but dressing and looking like I want to look, like I need to look with this woman. People are, especially in conservative-ass Florida, where she grew up and was beaten by cops for like skateboarding or something when she was 15 or 16. It's those feelings of how can I truly love things in my life if I'm not really myself? And it was as early as 2002 where these kind of lyrical things slipped in. So most recently, Transgender Dysphoria Blues, the full band record as Against Me, now with mostly new members, they've had trouble holding on to a rhythm section for most of their career, came out in 2014, and it was post the Rolling Stone article, post like the beginnings of her transitioning, and this is a quick article that I read that kind of like summarizes this whole career so far that I think beautifully, and then we'll go right into the record. This was someone who was just like me, majorly influenced by Against Me. This is actually someone who, once they signed to a major label, this person was like, oh, they're sellouts, I'm ignoring them. I hung on a little longer than that, but this is someone who hasn't seen Against Me in like 7 or 8 years live. But this is someone who came up with them from early on. And he said he loved going to Against Me shows for like all the emotional connection that these punk rock kids had to the music. And they stood for something. They stood for this lifestyle, or they stood for these beliefs, or this trying to find what having a real life is like outside of just the punk cliches, and just this serious emotional connection to the music and the lyrics and life and existentialism and all this stuff. But after they kind of started doing more of the stereotypical punk thing, it was like they no longer stood for something. They were just a random punk band out in the ether. and so he stopped going to the Against Me shows. But he went to a recent Against Me show in the last year and said that there were a few punk kids there, but it was mostly transgendered individuals. And they were connecting. He said he was watching them connect with the music in a way that he had not seen artists or fans connect with a band since early Against Me shows. And he said it was amazing to see that same kind of passion from a completely different group that had nothing, almost nothing to do with the original group of Against Me fans. And he said, I don't care what Against Me stands for anymore. I'm just happy they stand for something. That the band means something to a group of people, and I think that is such a cool, like, full circle. Like they found their meaning in a completely different other meaning. And yeah, the criticisms. Oh, she's just the band now. The band is just her. It's not what it was. You're right. It's not what it was, but it hasn't been what it was for such a long time. And the fact that the band can mean the world to two entirely different generations of people for completely different reasons is so amazing to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the Against Me story. Let's dive right into the record.
And on that, I gotta head out.
All right, what's your favorite part about the record?
Mine?
Yeah.
Well, I prepared for this like weeks ago.
Weeks ago.
So I don't remember offhand.
Oh, good. Well, then get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
This is the place of welcoming, so why don't you just get the hell out of here?
Keep on talking. I'm gonna look at the track list real quick.
Okay,
See if I can remember anything.
the best story as far as this is the Pints of Guinness Make You Strong. This is the first track off the record. He wrote it. God damn it. She wrote it about her grandparents and how her grandfather died in 1964. I assume from alcohol poisoning because it was St. Patrick's Day, and she was all the lyrics she's talking about alcohol and it's from the perspective. She's singing about her grandmother and how her grandmother never loved again after her grandfather died, and how she was just so depressed for the rest of her life, and it was just a sad story. And the chorus, now she's talking for herself, and just like James' grandfather, I'll be drinking Irish tonight in the memory of his last work week. Last work week. It's so, this Irish heritage so entrenched in the blue collar work week. Evelyn, grandmother, I'm not coming home tonight. If we're never together, then I'm never back again. Well, I swear to God that I'll love you forever. Evelyn, I'm not coming home tonight. It's this punk jaunty chant about how the grandfather's going to die and never come back. And there is just, in his wallet, she kept on the nightstand an AA card and a lock of red hair. Ugh, kills me. And there's a line in here, the bridge, or right before the second chorus. She said, if I would have known just how things would have ended up, I just would have let myself die. And there is it's so crushing, and it's just so meaningful. There is a video of Laura Jane Grace and the bassist and backup singer Dustin Friedkin playing in a basement somewhere with Laura Jane Grace's mom, I want to say, like family members all around, and then a bunch of punk kids. It's a basement punk show. And this was, I guess, not that long after they wrote the song, which was not that long after the grandmother passed away. And you just see the whole family and most of the audience just in tears as they're performing the song. And it is haunting and beautiful. And I have it all on if you look in the playlists for the Eric Tries Too Hard page, I took the videos from that show and I put them in a playlist. It's one of the most beautiful shows I've ever seen. And I would definitely recommend checking that out. But that's that song. That song is unbelievable.
I will check that out as I leave this podcast.
All right. So,
see you guys.
Yeah. So, Ryan, I'm not going to go through just because something happened. I don't know. David must have gotten lost on his way to the computer.
Sad.
Yeah, I know, very sad. Anyway, so you listen to this record. I can go through it, and I'll kind of breeze through it. I just wanted to really talk about the story of Against Me. Do you have any thoughts on the record or the band in general?
No, I think the story is much more interesting. I mean, I don't want to say the story is more interesting than the record. I listened to the record. I like the music. It didn't stick with me as a record that I need to hold up and keep playing. It sounded very samey, and I feel like listening to it once was really all I needed. But I didn't really invest myself too much in it. I guess maybe for that reason, it just all sounded kind of one note. Well, I like it. It just didn't
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing is that they're very much like one take, done, make it loud, make it fast. A lot of it. Yeah, it does that. And so with it's very disorienting because it really is like it's thrown on the paper, and it does take a lot of listens to really kind of get into it. But it's like just talking on a lyrical level, because that's one of the things that I loved about the record the most probably. So take a couple songs like The Politics of Starving, which is the next song, along with Scream into a Coffin of Blood, a couple other ones. Hey, David. Can you hear us? Because there's no echo, so if that's then we're good. Anyway, I'll keep talking. But they talk about the punk scene in a way that a lot of people don't. They question the punk scene, and not in the typical ways of, oh, you're not anarchist enough, or you're not punk enough. No, it's kind of like how the Clash used to question the punk scene. It's like, are you seriously telling me that we're the most open-minded people on the planet, but you're saying if someone isn't an atheist and isn't an anarchist, then they're not punk? Like, really? You're going to do... Or they also question... Like, there's a line in this song, or in the next song, where they say, are we just drinking buddies? Like, is that really what we are? Because there was so much of punk culture driven by alcohol and drug abuse, which is sweet. It's cool. But the fact that they're so all about this is what makes us punk, or this is how much it fuels us, it's like, wait, are we actually friends? Are we actually trying to do something constructive here, or are we just drinking buddies? Are we just like the jocks that we mock? Are we just like the idiots who were getting working at the office and then getting drunk at the bar afterwards? Are we just like all of these people that we try so hard not to be in this same way? So on that theme of speaking about punk rock emotionally, and by the way, David, jump in and say anything if you can hear us or whatever. Right. Oh, sweet. Oh, good. You're here. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I'm here.
So how about this? I was just going through song by song. I basically gave Ryan and the listeners... Okay, Ryan, David, Ryan.
Hey, how's it going?
I basically gave the listeners a quick summary of the band themselves, like itself, and their history. When did you get into Against Me, and how did you deal with the ups and downs of the sellout cries when they went from one thing to another?
I got into it probably when a little before Reinventing Axl Rose came out, I guess.
Yep, exact same time as me. That's
and I kind of stopped listening to him after a little bit because I just didn't like the new sound. But I don't think they're sellouts or anything. I mean, everybody wants to make money.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
You grow as a band, so I mean.
Yeah, what point did you stop listening? Was it new wave or was it before then?
It was new wave.
Okay, yeah, me too.
It turns into this weird. I mean, everybody grows when they learn how to play music, so you can't expect them to play what they were playing before forever, because it's going to get really boring. Yeah. I mean.
One of the things I was really pointing out about these early Against Me records, which would basically be even from Crime through Disco Before the Breakdown, how they had this emotional aspect to punk rock that no other bands really seemed to have, and I theorized that's why they had such a rabid fan base, and why so many people were hurt by any changes that they did. And I was kind of going through song by song on this record and pointing out all of the emotional aspects they throw in, like on Pints of Guinness, and I was just getting to how in We Laugh at Danger and Break All the Rules, she, that's been happening a lot, she sings a lot about, where is that? Second verse that's a long chorus, by the way. Here we go. And I can't help but hold on to the handful of times when what was spoken was a revolution in itself, and what we were doing was the only thing that mattered, and how good it felt to kill the memory of nights spent holding your shirt for the smell. I used to cry when you made love to him, but this band will play on. no punk band was writing like that. Like, it was insane. Somehow mixing this transient punk rock touring lifestyle with what at the time most punk rock dudes would be like, that's emo bullshit. Like, would you say that, and as we go into it, like the questioning of a lot of punk rock laurels, would you say that was partially, David, why you got into Against Me? Or what lyrically, what were some of the themes that got you into Against Me that maybe they did that other bands didn't do as much?
I pretty much just what you said. You can relate to, I can relate to, and a lot of people I know can relate to the first record a lot better than they can relate to their later stuff, just because how it's written and what it's about.
Yeah, like, yeah, no, exactly. And they, God, it's just such, in a sea of Rock Against Bush, the fact that they had, which they eventually dove right into, which is fine, still good music, but definitely not, like, at the same level. And then we get to the next song, hey, don't anyone tell my wife this, but I still love you, Julie, is what I named our kid after. So yeah. And that one, because at the time when this record came out, maybe a little after, maybe like 6 months after, I was dating, like, I was very much involved in the Baltimore punk scene, and I was dating, if you could call it that, the Baltimore, like, scene queen girl, and was very much like, and like whole, green mohawk, had the whole thing going. Eventually she grew out of some of her bullshit, not drugs though, that always stayed, but and opened up her own punk venue in Baltimore, which was a really successful venue, which was cool. But anyway, we had this thing where I was like part of the punk rock, like, scene, but I wasn't into the whole get tattooed up, smoke a bunch of crack, and your personality is defined by your hairstyle. I didn't believe in that shit like a lot of them did. And so while she and I had our little weird love affair thing, this song I related to so much because it was like, he says, I sang last night a room full drunk, sang along to the songs I never had the courage to write. I related that so much because it was like, I feel so outside of this group. Like this group that we're all supposed to be so close together. I believe the same things you all do, but I just am not related to it. And then he has the whole verse about walking around the streets at 4 a.m., and, like, that's what me and this girl would do. We would get away from this whole punk scene thing that did not approve of me. And I don't know. It was just this beautiful, beautiful song about maybe somehow this scam, the punk scene, will save us all. So it's just like, I don't know. I don't even know. What do you guys think that's about? Yeah, exactly. No, I don't know, it's so weird. I don't know. Maybe I relate to it. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but it's just like the punk scene in itself seems like a scam, and we just kind of go into it blindly, like, oh, this is going to be our revolution. This is a good question for you, David. Now, in Baltimore, and even like Fat Mike from NoFX said this was happening in California a lot. During this time, we all thought the punk rock revolution was going to take over the country. We thought we were going to somehow turn this into an anarcho-punk state through sheer, I don't know through what, but we all thought we were. And there's so many Against Me lyrics about that. What was it like when you were experiencing the early to mid-2000s like punk rock wave? Did you guys all feel like there was some revolution coming, or what did you guys feel was going on?
I didn't feel any of that stuff.
I know, you're so much more level-headed than me.
I lived in the woods. It kind of sucked. I didn't know any other punk kids.
Oh, okay. So you got to experience it like,
by myself.
Like I imagine,
Pretty
like
boring.
every time I listen to Taking Back Sunday, all I can think of is like the one emo dude in Nebraska in 2002 who was like, "I wish everyone else was as sad as me." Oh, man. All right, so just moving along, I think the only other song, I loved those Anarcho-Punks Are Mysterious and how that real questioning of what punk rock means and how so many people flock to it. And I got to say, I knew a lot of crust punks. Crust punks fucking hated this record because it basically told them that they could go fuck themselves. And no one else really had the balls to do that because they were like the de facto, we are the true forms of punk. And everyone else should strive to be like us, which, yeah. And then I guess anybody who's listening to this is somebody who probably already knows the record. But 8 Full Hours of Sleep is one of those beautiful songs I've ever heard. And another example, the first verse really ties together. It's like, when you sleep, no one's homeless. When you sleep, you can't feel the hunger. No one's lonely in a dream. Without classes, without nations, when you sleep. And it's like it's a perfect example of how they tie all these punk politics into, he dives right into like this emotional stuff. God damn it. She's standing there with open arms, and one night could last forever. And if you asked her, she'd never let go, and you'd stay forever. And it's just like this longing, and it goes into the second verse of, let the new night bring you peace, and where the promise of tomorrow, we can wake to a new beginning, and just my friends and my family, the memories we've had, like all this, and the times we should have lived, which is also another aspect of how just being a part of punk rock mentality and culture tears you away from the people you love if the people you love aren't involved in the same stuff. It's very polarizing. And it's just this, I don't know, this emotional component to how the internal side of punk rock that most people never talk about. They always talk about the external. And this record, I think, was just really brought that to a pinnacle. And I don't know, it's just a beautiful, 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 beautiful record. You know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Sure.
So, Ryan, this is something that you had mentioned before. You had said, like, I really wish that she got her credit for, or at least the amount of press for coming out as transgender that Caitlyn Jenner did. And obviously we're not trying to, like, compare one to the other.
Yeah, but it's just like, I mean, I feel like Caitlyn Jenner did a lot of good things for bringing
transgender issues to the forefront,
people into the public light,
which is
but it seems like beyond that she's kind of a terrible person.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't mean you weren't like a star on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. We remember when we hated all of them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's done good things for bringing the issue to light, but beyond that, I don't know.
Have a brilliant artist do it instead.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? As far as if you take out the personal life of Caitlyn Jenner, and you think about what someone like Bruce Jenner coming out as transgender means to where's that joke been on South Park? Like what you think, because here's the thing. Bill Burr was talking about this on his podcast where it was mind blowing to him. He's always very vocal about he wants to be progressive about transgender issues, but it's like the one thing his almost 50-year-old came from like urban Boston, can't wrap his mind around, is that he would say that growing up, Bruce Jenner was the macho sports guy on all the Wheaties boxes. When we make reference to being on the cover of Wheaties, Bruce Jenner is the cover of Wheaties that everyone's thinking of. Like, that's what that is. And so it's just, so I think that's even more so a positive thing for the transgender community, because all these older people who are having trouble understanding transgender stuff, even older people who get gay rights can still have trouble with transgender stuff, is when a 70s sports hero becomes, or sports legend, I know people are touchy about the word hero, it comes out as transgender. That's a huge deal. Like that exposes the transgender community to an audience that really needs exposure to it to get it. So David, did you have any thoughts when she came out as transgender? And what do you think about did you listen to the newest record?
Yeah, I really like the newest record, actually.
It's like a
really
return to form.
Yeah. It's so weird how they managed to go from what they were before to this record.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's because she's comfortable now or something.
Yeah, and feels comfortable just writing what she was trying to write before without having any kind of barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also went in. We went into, before you got here, David. We went into previous records, and there are traces. And I mean, she says she didn't know that she was transgender.
In Miami.
Yep. I didn't even think of Miami. What's the line from that one?
he said that sometimes he wishes he was born a woman, and his mom would have named him Laura.
Oh no, that was
Something
the
like
ocean. That was the ocean.
Oh, but the ocean, I get him.
Yeah, dude.
I think
I was gonna say, I was like, Miami's about doing coke and like beating people.
Yeah. I like that song.
Did you hear? You might have even heard this, Ryan. Did you hear Laura Jane Grace on Mark Maron's podcast a few weeks ago?
No, I saw that came out, and I really need to download that and listen to it. I'm really interested.
It's pretty cool. What they really get into, though, I mean, because I guess Laura is now estranged from her wife. I guess things did not go so well as the transition was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that's interesting in that interview with Mark Maron is she talks about how, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'll catch David up, how in interviews in the mid-2000s, when asked how the Against Me shows were so intense, Laura was like, oh yeah, we're just young and full of energy, and we like to leave it all on the stage. And then years later, she was like, we were just all hopped up on coke. Just out of our minds. And they had all this, and so she mentions how she's still doing hard drugs. And Mark Maron, who's like been in like recovery for a decade, is like, you know, you should, because of all this with your estrangement of your wife and your transition and your lifestyle, maybe you should lay off the drugs. And he's like, nah. And Maron goes, well, good luck with all that. Like, basically pulls his Seinfeld. Like, it's a really cool interview, and I think the drug stuff's even more interesting than the transgender stuff in that particular interview. But, and last thing before we go, because we'll wrap up. Ryan, I think you'll like this. David, I'm sure you've heard this. There's a story that another band tells that has kind of been confirmed like across time. This album, Reinventing Axl Rose, which the idea was Guns N' Roses was one of Laura's favorite bands growing up, and she saw Axl Rose as like this essentially punk rock god. Even though they weren't punk, he represented that. But then as time went on, he was just, you know, an egomaniac, like, whatever, just he didn't embody any of that. So this album is like, hey, let's reinvent Axl Rose. Let's create a band that speaks for the things that Axl Rose potentially used to speak for, as far as in Laura's mind. And the cover has Axl Rose's face on it, and apparently Axl Rose got really into voodoo, and when he found out about this record, he took up a copy, he smashed it. And then he made voodoo dolls representing Against Me, and would like poke them and shit. And so yeah, Axl Rose knows about this record and is not too pleased with it.
Why did he have such an averse reaction to it? I mean, it's partial tribute.
It's tribute to the person he used to be, which, by the way, is so ironic because of how Against Me fans turned on Against Me.
Yeah.
and they're like, you weren't what you used to be. And their whole, like, what they used to be was poking fun at somebody for what they used to be. And the most obscure joke that I've ever made, which I'm really proud of, which no one has really pointed out to me yet, so maybe people get it, I don't know. I put out a cover record with a couple of Against Me songs on it, and I called it Reinventing Dustin Fridkin, which is their original bassist and backup singer, who, after he left, was when everyone called them sellouts. And I had someone, my friend Dave, Photoshop. I took the cover of Reinventing Axl Rose and had my friend Photoshop an image of Dustin Friedkin, like in his likeness on the cover. I was really proud of that. Anyway.
Did he buy a copy and smash it?
Yeah. Oh my God. I want to have that Dustin on the podcast. I haven't asked him. He's a professor in Florida, and I'm sure but I'm just worried because I'm sure everyone asks him to talk about Against Me stuff. I'd love to, like, I don't know, I really want to talk to him. Anyway, I'm going to send him a tweet after this. So yeah, well, thank you both for coming on. Any last thoughts? Plugs. David, can you plug your band?
No.
Ryan loves your band name, by the way.
It's fantastic. Eric always talks about these bands with, like, the worst, shittiest names that just... they're terrible, and he mentioned your band name, and it made me so happy because it was actually a good band name. So thank you for having a great band name.
All right, well, check out the Gnarly Whales, and check out. Oh, we've got a split. You're gonna love this, Ryan, because you're a fucking hipster. David and I have a split cassette coming out.
Oh God, why a cassette?
Cause it's better.
Why are cassettes a thing? It pisses me off.
Would you prefer it to be vinyl, Ryan?
I just give you a digital download.
It will come with the digital download.
Okay. Well, why let the buy this? Plastic.
Hold on, let David talk, son of a bitch.
The cassette tapes actually sell a lot better than, because like when you go to shows and stuff, people want like a physical copy. I mean,
they don't want CDs. They want kitschy shit.
Yeah, we had a bunch of cassettes. Yeah, vinyl's really expensive. We're having my band's having one of those come out in December.
Nice. There's your plug.
Yeah, vinyl's really expensive, and it's kind of hard to. You have to write good songs to put on vinyl. You're gonna feel like an idiot. You can write a bunch of crappy songs and put them on a tape, and you're fine with it.
Yeah, Ryan, Ryan loves more like folky rock stuff. I feel like we need to turn you to the dark side, Ryan. I got to get you into some good folk punk.
Good folk punk.
Yeah, that's all. Well, that's the thing. I need him to lower his expectations. But like,
I'm down with folk punk. I have nothing against it.
Don't know shit. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. All right, well, thank you both for coming on.
I got a plug, bro.
Shit, what's your plug? Yeah.
I don't know when this is going to air, but Lessig 2016.
Who?
Lawrence Lessig, running for president. No one's talking about him. Do it up.
Yeah, he'll have 12 votes from this podcast, and they'll all be from you and your 11 cats. All right, well, Thank you guys very much for coming on, and I will catch you later. Peace.
Bye.